the 18th of September 1993. Dear friends, I'm sending you a panel in memory of Nigel Dickens, which I hope you will incorporate into the Names Project quilt. Nigel was a gay man who died at 34 years of age with HIV-related illness. He knew people in Derby, Liverpool, Leicester, London, Birmingham, and goodness knows where else. I feel it would be appropriate to display the panel anywhere in the UK, though perhaps especially the cities mentioned. Nigel also lived for a while in America, Africa and the Middle East. As someone so well travelled, it seems right that his panel should travel too, if ever the quilt goes outside the UK. I made the panel myself, though his family discussed the wording with me and let me use some of Nigel's paints in making it. Please keep me up to date about venues where Nigel's panel will be on display, and I will endeavour to let his family and friends know when it is near to them. About Nigel. When I first met Nigel, he was already ill. I was linked to him as a buddy by the scheme in Derby for which I work as a volunteer. During the 16 months I knew him, Nigel made a profound impression on my life, and I cannot possibly convey everything that happened during this turbulent time. Then again, I don't feel I have to go into all this detail, for the panel I have made and the photograph both tell stories that say something of Nigel and what he meant to me. I chose the material for the panel from a shop at a craft centre, which Nigel used to regularly visit himself. Grey was colour Nigel used a lot around his home, and was also the colour he chose for his coffin. Most of the fabric paints used were from Nigel's own art box, loaned to me by his family for the purpose of doing this panel. Nigel didn't have long-standing artistic experience, but had developed the interest during the last few years of his life. He went to a part-time class in watercolour painting and was also particularly interested in home decoration and stenciling. Even when he was terminally ill in a hospice, hardly able to move or eat, the patterns he had stenciled and the artistic materials he had accumulated surrounded his bed, reminding everybody of his joy in creativity. The rectangular marbled border to Nigel's panel was created by a technique that Nigel called bagging, which he'd learned from one of the many art classes he attended. Nigel showed me how to do this one day when he roped me in to help finish a decorating project he'd started at the new Derby Friend office. Derby Friend is a volunteer-run lesbian and gay befriending and helpline organisation that had just acquired a new office and employed a Men Who Have Sex Men outreach worker, who Nigel considered a great friend. The bagging technique consists of using crumpled paper dipped in paint to create a textured pattern on a wall or other flat surface. We had a great time doing the Derby Friend office all that day, though I had to finish the job because Nigel got so exhausted. I used a similar technique for the writing, which was done through a stencil cut from masking film. The simple message was decided by Nigel's mother and sister, whom I spoke with about making this panel shortly after his death. Nigel's mother particularly wanted the rest in peace wording, because Nigel had been so tortured by his illness during the last few weeks of his life. For me, these words bring back the memory of Nigel shortly after he died. silent and peaceful at last, with a rose laid on his pillow by the nursing staff at the hospice. During those last minutes, I was with him alone. I told him how, despite all the pain and the difficult times we'd shared, my respect for him and the love I felt living through this with him had grown. I told him I'd never forget, and I never will. The big white lilies are there because they were Nigel's favourite flower. I remember spending one afternoon trying to show him how to draw them, and people who bought him flowers often arrived with lilies. The roses and daffodils were done using Nigel's own stencils, designs which still survive as Nigel's own work on t-shirts and walls at his sister's home and the Derby Friend office. The daisies were done with a stencil I made myself, added for colour and because I think Nigel would have liked them. They're fab, I hear him say. The Photograph for Names project files shows Nigel at a benefit do, masterminded by him to raise money for local HIV organisations' funds. The do was organised at the local gay club Curzons, who along with several heroic volunteers from the Buddy scheme helped Nigel realise this great ambition. The party was called the Mermaid's Ball, a theme inspired by the then current Cher movie Mermaids, which Nigel and I saw together at the cinema. Nigel and I painted the octopus and the mermaids on cardboard in his sister's garage. The club did the background, and the fish were contributed by various individuals as part of a competition. The fish later reappeared to decorate Nigel's room at the hospice and provided joy and comfort even in his final days. At Nigel's funeral, no secret was made of his gay sexuality, his death from HIV-related illness, and the tribute to him was lengthy and honest. We heard of someone who'd lost several friends in London through HIV and had travelled to Derby to be with his family when illness and isolation overtook him. We heard of someone who'd travelled through Africa, America and the Middle East, trying several different jobs, always adventurous and always enjoying life. We heard the story of a full and largely happy life, whose only great shadow was HIV, its claim on his friends, and eventually the illnesses it brought to him. I cannot recognise the Nigel in the photographs before he was ill, and his life before I knew him is like another world. I don't believe that HIV did Nigel any favours, even though he lived a creative and full life in his final years, with a power that few are ever privileged to experience. His constant battle to enjoy life, to squeeze every drop of pleasure from each hour was, and always will be, an inspiration. With all good wishes to everyone at the Names Project UK, Andrew Colclough.